Good morning. Well, good morning, Chamber members and friends, and what a beautiful, beautiful winter morning it is. I want to welcome you all to the Chamber's annual Economic and Investment Outlook breakfast, we'll call it, at your either home or in your office. A bottomless cup of coffee for anyone who's here today. So thank you all from wherever you're joining us from this morning. My name is Bill Purcell, your Chamber President and co-host for this morning's program, along with Chamber Vice President Nancy Gray, who we call the Wizard. She's behind the curtain, keeping us all connected on this wonderful platform called AirMeet. We're truly delighted to have not one, but two very distinguished speakers joining us this morning. First, backed by popular demand, is Mr. John Traynor, the Executive Vice President and Chief Investment Officer at People's United, who will kick off the program. He'll be formally introduced in a moment by Justin. John will be followed by Patrick Flaherty. We know Patrick is here, Director of Research and Information at the Connecticut Department of Labor. And this is Patrick's first visit with us, but not we are not strangers. I've known Patrick for a number of years, and you're going to enjoy his presentation as well. Well, together, John and Patrick will discuss a wide range of issues.
Looks like we lost Bill, Justin.
To include inflation, interest rates, fluctuations, supply chain challenges, workforce shortages, and of course, the Great Resignation. And all of this is in the context of rising tensions on the international front, a better than expected jobs report from the U.S. Labor Department, and last week, or earlier this week, the start of a new legislative session in Hartford that just got underway on Wednesday. Today's forum comes on the heels of last month's special chamber healthcare forum featuring Dr. Fred Brown, the Chief Medical Officer at Griffin Health. Dr. Fred provided our members with an insightful look into the science behind COVID testing, vaccines, and boosters at a forum that we call the Valley's Response to the Pandemic. As both of our speakers know, it is impossible to separate the public health crisis from any discussion about the global, national, and state economy. So finally, let me extend a special thanks to our presenting sponsors, People's United Bank and CLA, CliftonLarsonAllen, LLP. I think it's been the past 10 years that People's United and CLA and its predecessor company, Bloom Shapiro, have been proud sponsors and significant contributors to this special event. A bit later in the program, I'll formally introduce you to John Zinno, CPA and principal at CLA's Shelton office. But for now, I'm going to turn the program over to my friend Justin Vescovi, Vice President at People's United Bank. I have the pleasure of working with Justin. He represents the bank on the Chamber's Board of Directors. We also join together as co-directors at the Valley United Way. And Justin, I know you're also active with the Shelton Economic Development Corporation, which is leading driving the revitalization of downtown Shelton. So Justin, we thank you for your support and your friendship. We're going to ask you for a couple of words about your fine bank and to formally introduce Mr. Traynor. Justin.
Thanks, Bill. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Greetings all. Good morning, and thank you, Bill, and Nancy and Laura. Welcome, Patrick, and it's good to see you back here, John Zinno. The team and I are happy to be here again, continuing this tradition. I didn't realize it was 10 years, but certainly the last 3 that I've been here, co-sponsoring this wonderful event with CliftonLarsonAllen. I'm Justin Vescovi, the market manager for People's United Bank here in the Valley. It was nearly a year ago we convened here in a similar fashion, and things have certainly changed, but also many things haven't. Last February we announced a merger with M&T Bank, and today we're hopeful to get Federal Reserve Board approval soon. And if my 17-year career has taught me one thing, it's that change is a certainty, and it can be life-changing when approached with a strong team and an open mind. And we've all here, everyone, learned to adapt and change. And I believe it's truly made us stronger. And So we're looking through the windshield as two great banks combine to bring, great resources to our clients and communities. Some things that haven't changed is the team and I continue to work in this great valley where we, serve our communities, businesses, and residents, our friends and neighbors to achieve their financial goals. What hasn't changed is our commitment to delivering financial literacy to local senior centers, elementary schools, high schools, technical schools, working with our nonprofit partners to deliver meals around the holidays and some family cheer. What hasn't changed is that our Stop and Shop franchise serving our Valley towns are going to remain open under a new contract with Stop and Shop. So we're going to continue to deliver exceptional customer experience to our offices here in the Valley in Shelton, Ansonia, Seymour, and Naugatuck, and we're going to continue to do so for years to come. So with that, this morning it brings me great pleasure to introduce my colleague, John Traynor. John's our Executive Vice President and Chief Investment Officer. As such, John directs our overall investment process and has ultimate responsibility for working with various investment committees. He also serves as chief spokesman for the firm's investment outlook through regular strategy briefings. He appears regularly on CNBC, Nightly Business Report, Fox Business Network. John, prior to joining People's United Wealth Management in 2011, served as Director of Investment Strategy and Alternative Investments at Hawthorne, a $22 billion family office in PNC Financial Group. John is a board member of the Council of Churches on the Professional Advisors Council for the Fairfield Community Foundation, chairman of OARS, a member of the Patterson Club, Saugatuck Rowing Club, and the University Barge Club. And as a Villanova grad, big win over St. John's earlier this week, John has a bachelor's degree in business administration from Villanova and a concentration in finance. And we're so pleased to have you again here today, John. I can turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Justin. And while I'll load my slides, but I just wanted to expand on what you just talked about. I get a lot of questions regarding, how will the merger between Peoples and M&T impact me? Well, I'll tell you, the resources that are going to be at Justin's fingertips, at my fingertips, are going to be phenomenal. And then, in addition to that, Peoples is very active, our community foundation active in the local community, and M&T shares that. So, I think, from a business standpoint, the merger is very good, but from a community standpoint, I think the merger is going to be even better. So hopefully you'll be able to see an awful lot of that. I'm going to go through the slides fairly quickly, and I know, we had a big headline yesterday on inflation. So I'm sure we're gonna talk about that. I was looking at the futures just a second ago. The futures are down this morning. The 10-year yield is right at 2%. So we've had some big moves in the market. So I want to get into that. If we think about the year ahead, there are a few big headlines that we're going to be watching for. Economic growth. You saw the fourth quarter, 6.9%. A lot of that was driven by inventory building. Real final demand, what we all bought, was up 1.9%. So the fourth quarter, the headline number was strong, but it wasn't as strong as you would think. There was a lot of inventory building. We think, and I've got a chart in here on inventory building. We think that will continue and help us drive forward. But we see a slowing in that growth. Still growth, but a slowing in that growth in 2022. Inflation, you saw the number, in presentations earlier this week, I was saying we'd get a print north of 7%. We got 7.5%. We actually think February's number will be a little bit higher. So we're going to have more bad news on the inflation front. Employment, anybody that's out there that's looking for a job, you've got a lot of options. If you're trying to hire somebody, it's incredibly difficult. We see that continuing. We actually see that getting worse. So we're going to talk about that. That's one of the big themes this morning. And then with interest rates, back in 2020, that 10-year treasury, which we use as our benchmark, that was down to 0.5%, 50 basis points. As I said this morning, it's at 2%. So we've seen a huge increase in the 10-year. We've seen an even bigger increase in the shorter term rates. We think the Fed is going to be pushing those rates up. So there are economic implications for that also. If you take a look at our forecast, we're not that far off from consensus. Look, we're just below 4% for growth this year. We think the inflation will come back. The 7% number right now is pretty high. We think we'll come back to a more sustainable level. You see it at year end, we think we're going to be about 3.5%. The key issue, and we're going to talk about this, is I want you to think about inflation, but think about goods inflation, what we buy in the store, Stop and Shop, going out and buying new cars, used cars, whatever, and then service inflation. When you go out to a restaurant, we're seeing price increases. The difference between goods inflation and service inflation, I think people are going to be paying more attention to that as we go forward. A couple of economic charts before we dive into where the workers have gone. This is the leading economic index. And I know the last time we got together, I showed you this chart. I'm sure I told you it was a great indicator. It gives us a very good indication as to when a recession is coming. It's worked very well. Because of the pandemic, it didn't work at all in 2020. What we do believe, though, take a look at how sharply it has rebounded. We think this is giving us a very good indication that the economic recovery is going to continue very, very nicely, and it's got some legs. It's sustainable, which is great. This is wages. Take a look. For the last 30 years, wage growth bounced between 2% and 4%. We were in a nice channel. When we got close to 4%, the Fed started to slow the economy. We would roll over. Well, the information here is incredibly distorted. What you'll notice, though, every time we see a high spike, that basically means we're not rehiring the lower paid workers as quickly as we want to. You'll see last year we actually got down below 2%. That was great. That means we're rehiring the lower paid workers. So, we need to bring back more of the service workers. The manufacturing workers have done well. They've done well throughout this entire, and professionals have done well throughout this entire pandemic. We need to bring back a lot of the service workers, the waiters and waitresses, the people that work in the hotels. As we see that happen, we think we're going to get back to a more sustainable level on the wage side. If you take a look at unemployment and take a look at that red line, that red line tells you what economists believe. That's an estimate, but what economists think the normal rate of unemployment would be. You'll see we spiked up dramatically. We're now below that. So we're in the danger zone as far, because you see normally when we get down here, a recession tends to happen. That's when the Fed is starting to raise rates. So going below that level, which is a little over 4%, going below that level basically starts to get the Fed nervous. That's one of the reasons why they're raising interest rates. So we need to keep an eye on that. This is an interesting chart. Remember I talked about the stuff that we buy. The blue line there is goods spending, cars, computers, everything, all of the materials that we buy. Since the pandemic, what we spend on goods has exploded. That orange line is what we spend on services, going out to the movies, going out to restaurants. We're still not back to where we were in February of 2020. So what we're hoping is that these two lines come together. You don't need to buy a car every week. You don't need to buy a new computer every week. So hopefully we spend less on goods, we spend more on services. That'll allow restaurants to continue. Hopefully they can rehire more people, and that'll take a little bit of the pressure off the supply chain issues and the goods inflation that we're seeing. So seeing those two lines come back together the way they normally have been would be great. And that's one of the things economists are really focusing on right there. The next two slides are on consumer confidence and business confidence. And you'll see here, you've got a blue line, consumer confidence. The red line is consumer sentiment. Confidence tends to be a little longer term, so it's impacted more by employment. So people are more positive about employment, so the blue line is higher. The red line is a little shorter term. That's where consumers are probably a little bit more impacted by inflation. So if you ask somebody, how are you feeling about your job? They're pretty confident. If you ask them, what are your thoughts about inflation? They're very, very nervous. So, depending upon where consumers are, and you notice Joe Biden is out, he realizes that inflation is really scaring a lot of voters. So he's out there and he's worried more about that red line, the consumer sentiment. He needs to see that line move up, meaning people are just less concerned about inflation. This is all of us on this screen. The blue line is CEO confidence, and you'll see, that if you're the CEO of an S&P 500 or a Fortune 100 company, you're feeling pretty good. You were able to handle the pandemic very well, and your business is probably doing very well. The red line, small businesses. And look, small businesses have just taken it on the chin. They've really suffered throughout this pandemic. Their confidence hasn't rebounded, primarily because it's so difficult to find employees. But there's a growing gap between small business confidence and big business confidence. Big gap between the two. This is a chart that gets me as an investor very, very nervous. I know I showed this to you last time and it's only gotten worse. What that red area means is that we are paying back. When you're borrowing money from the bank, you're actually paying back with negative dollars, less valuable dollars. And, take a look at this. That trend existed for a little while back in the 70s, but we've had an incredible period, 10 years basically, of negative real rates and just incredibly low interest rates. As an investor, I get very nervous that when money is free, when your hurdle rate is zero, lots of bad decisions get made. So one of the things that you need to be very cautious about if you're investing, if you've got your 401k, is I know there's that ARC ETF that was up 150% in 2020, and it's gotten clobbered ever since. It invested in a lot of those high growth companies, a lot of the highly valued companies. A lot of those are the ones that are blowing up right now. So you want to err on the side of caution with your investing. This chart will probably come back to bite us in a few years. So let's get into the meat of the presentation. Where have all the workers gone? Well, first of all, let's just take a look at the labor force. All right, you've got the growth in the labor force, which is that red line. We're still adding people, which is great. The blue line is the labor force participation rate. So even though we're adding people, fewer people in that mix are working, and it's a trend that's been going on for a while. We saw a peak years ago. That decline is something that we think is going to continue. As employers, we've got to figure out, number one, how do we hold on to our existing employees, and how do we lure back into the labor force a lot of workers that have left, a lot of workers that maybe their skills have become obsolete. But this is a big issue. This is a big issue if we want to have a strong, growing economy. This is one of the issues that's hurting us. Here's a chart on demographics, and I've sent all of these charts to Nancy. So if you want to get copies of these, that's fine. A lot of these are really interesting charts. But take a look. Each year, the growth in the labor force has been declining. We're all having fewer kids. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I don't see too many families anymore with 5 kids. So that's slowly declining. And you take a look at where we are now. The labor force is growing very slowly. So we need to figure out, number one, can we increase that labor force? I know immigration is a very, very tense issue right now, but it's something that we need to talk about. And can we hold on to the workers? The next chart is one that I want you all to really understand. If you take a look at that top line, looks like it's a pretty easy line. Those are our core workers between the ages of 25 and 54. The orange line, all right, those are our 20 to 24-year-olds. That blue line, the 16 to 19-year-olds. So you'll see, look at how far back this chart goes. Slowly, younger people, their labor force participation has been declining. Part of that is, people are spending more time going to school, to learn. There's many more kids are going to college. So it's probably fairly logical to see those lines going down. One of the bright parts, I'm in that yellow line. That's the 55 plus. One of the nice trends that we saw was that a lot of people were delaying retirement, and they were saying, I'm going to keep working. It looks like, really for the last 10 years, that level has probably balanced, evened out. We don't think we're going to get a bigger percentage here. What we'd love to do is just make sure we hold on to them. But the key thing is, look at that top line. It actually looks like it's fairly stable. Let's take a better look at it, though. This is that same group, but it's broken down into men and women. This chart goes back to 1960. In 1960, if you were a man between the ages of 25 and 54, that 97% of those men were in the workforce. You were working. Right now, you can take a look at the bullet points that I have there. We're down to 88%. Take a look at women. Back in 1960, about 45% of the women in that age group were in the workforce. Slowly, all right, as kids went to school and women really started to enter the workforce, we got up to about 77%. We're right around 75% right now. We don't believe we're going to see the women's participation rate move up. That's a pretty good level. It matches what a lot of the European companies or countries are doing. What we're trying to figure out, though, is how do we get more men? Now, these are men in their prime working years. How do we get more of them back into the workforce? And there are researchers at great universities all over the country trying to figure out, how do we do that? How do we get them back? If we just went from 88% back up halfway, 92, 93%, a lot of the labor problems that we're talking about this morning go away. So that's a big issue, trying to figure that out. This is, again, might be some of the people on this call. Remember where I showed you that we had some pretty good news on the 55 plus? Well, one of the things that we take a look at is, what's the normal retirement rate? And that's that red dotted line. What you see in 2020, the St. Louis Fed went back and they did a study that there were 2 million excess retirements. Now, what they believe is that a lot of those people that retired may come back working part-time, but there was a big spike in retirement. So we've lost a huge portion of probably some of our most productive, some of our most knowledgeable workers, that 55 plus, because they decided to take early retirement. I lost one of my best portfolio managers during COVID. He and his wife went up to their home up in Maine, and he called me about 6 months later and said, you know what, we think we can make this work. I'm going to take early retirement. The guy was 62 and had no plans to retire, but because of COVID, he said, we can make this work. So this is hopefully a trend, and we're going to keep watching this. Do we get some of those excess retirees back? But that's a big issue. This is one of the last charts I've got on the labor force. This is the number of people that are quitting, the quitters versus the stayers, and you'll see that gap is opening. We actually think that gap is going to get even wider, that you're seeing a lot of people quit. Normally what you see is it's probably more the professional class that quit. One of the things that we're seeing that's very interesting here is that you're seeing it again. A lot of it is waiters and waitresses that, boy, there's a place down the street that's going to pay me $2 or $3 an hour more. I'm going to leave. So that not only is that quit rate increasing, but the type of person that's quitting and going to get a better job is actually changing. And you can see from the second bullet point there, we think that's a trend that's going to continue also. So if you're in business and you're sitting there, I know I've got to worry about it. I've got to make sure that I can hold on to some of my best people. I'm certainly looking to hire people, but boy, I better hold on to some of my best people. We talked about finances. Take a look at this chart, see how far back it goes. The amount of money that we had in our checking accounts was pretty stable. Look at the incredible spike. A lot of the stimulus money that came out of Washington, that came out of the states, basically, we got the check, we paid off a little bit of the credit card debt, and then we put the rest of it in the bank. So balance sheets are incredible. I just got a note that you've lost me Is that correct? Well, I'll keep going. I'll keep going. Perhaps that's Justin. But balance sheets are in pretty good shape. This is a chart that I know I've shown you, and I think I've shown this to you quite a few years. But it's the state of Connecticut at the bottom, Massachusetts in the middle, and the U.S. economy at the top. Basically, what this says is that Connecticut still needs to rebound and get us going back to where we need to be. I'm going to go through the next few slides pretty quickly because I want to make sure that I keep us on time. This gives you a sense. Remember, I was talking about the waiters and the waitresses. Well, that blue line, that really tall blue line, those are the workers in the hospitality and leisure industry. Basically, waiters, waitresses, and the people that work in hotels. And take a look at the increase in pay that they're seeing. A lot of us, probably a lot of people on this video can say, yeah, those are some of my employees. So we're seeing a pretty substantial increase in wages in an area that hasn't seen them in the past. So, I know, it's going to be competitive. And again, we see that continuing. I threw in a cartoon here. I won't read it, but it basically means that, the little mouse there is your employee. And it looks like, we may have to pay a little bit more and be a little bit more generous and work with our employees a little bit better. They have the leverage in the negotiations. So essentially, when it comes to the workers, if I'm an employer, what do I need to do? I need to hold on to my older workers. I've got to be much more flexible with how they work. I don't need to have them in here every 5 days a week. And what I'm thinking about is to hold on to them. I need to have them become more mentors. So I've got to have a plan for how do I hold on to my older workers? Then how do I bring in the younger workers? I've got to look in maybe some unconventional areas, and I may need to do some more training. In the past, when I would look for a portfolio manager, I just, take a look and say, okay, let me, bring in a young man, a young woman from one of our competitors, and they'd be all trained. I probably need to do more of the training now. So I need to be a little bit more creative in bringing in the younger workers, and I've got to be more creative in trying to hold on to workers. What we're hoping is that we see a burst in capital spending, that, we all as business people invest to try and improve the productivity of all of our workers. That would be a great benefit. We believe that we're on a virtuous cycle, that this is sustaining. As long as inflation doesn't get out of control, we think we could actually be in from an economic standpoint, a pretty good situation. I thought we might get some questions on the political landscape. What this chart tells you is, generally, based if the president's popularity ratio has declined, they lose seats in the midterm election. And you'll see only in George Bush II, because of the Gulf War, there was a lot of enthusiasm. He actually picked up seats. It's pretty common for the president, for the party in power, to lose some seats. This is the second to last chart here. This is a chart that I had in our July economic outlook, and you'll see, in 1982, the stock market took off. All right, for the 16 years before that, it was just terrible. And a lot of people are wondering, well, why did that happen? Well, there was a study done by McKinsey, and I pulled this chart out of I think the study was only done in September or October. Take a look at the productivity gains for roughly that same time period, 13%. And wages increased by 6%. That means that businesses and labor basically split the benefits of productivity 50-50. You get half, I get half. Take a look at what's happened since 1980. Productivity's increased 73%. As employees, we're all working pretty well. We're working smarter. Take a look at wages. Wages have increased 13%. So there's a lot of pressure on businesses to say, you know what? We need to increase our capital spending and invest in the business, but you know what? We may need to share. We probably need to share more of the benefits of that with our employees. So we actually believe these two lines are going to come together as we move forward. So, Bill, I'm going to stop there and let you hand it off to Patrick.
Okay, John, thank you so much. Brilliant once again. And we're going to hold questions. I'm sure there will be questions. As we bring up John Zinno and Patrick Flaherty, I want to urge our audience to put your questions in the chat box this morning. And if you're brave enough to also come up to the stage, let us know as well. And we will magically make you appear on the screen to pose your question. We're trying to get John Zinno up. We got John. We see your photo, but not you personally. I hope you'll come up. There you are. So please do over the next second half of the program. Please share your questions in the chat box. And again, once again, if you're willing to come up on stage to pose the question directly to us speakers, we'd appreciate it. So it's now my pleasure to introduce my friend John Zinno, CPA. John is principal in the CLA Shelton office, where he provides accounting, auditing, and advisory services to a wide range of privately held businesses and their owners, as well as nonprofit organizations. John earned his BS in accounting from Assumption College in my hometown of Worcester, Massachusetts. John, if you haven't been up to Worcester lately, my gosh, it's come a long way. And
yeah, it sure has.
Yeah, we need to fortify our cities here in Connecticut as well. John is very, very active in his professional associations, including the Connecticut Society of CPAs and the American Institute of CPAs. And much like Justin, he's also an active volunteer community leader with organizations such as the United Way of Greater Waterbury, Post University, and the Magnificent Palace Theater in Waterbury, just to name a few. So, John, would you please tell us a little bit about CLA? I think it's just over a year.
Yes.
Yep. And then to formally introduce Patrick Flaherty. So the screen is yours, John.
Thank you very much, Bill, and appreciate the kind introduction. And also a very special thanks to you and your entire team at the Chamber for all that you do for the business community throughout the Valley. CLA is, again, very proud to join People's United Bank as a co-sponsor of this wonderful annual Chamber event. And that was very insightful. You know, John Traynor's thoughts were right on, and look forward to hearing some questions and answers in the near future here. But, you know, just a little bit on CLA. We are the 8th largest accountancy firm with approximately 7,400 people located in more than 120 offices across the country. In addition to our Shelton, Connecticut office located at 2 Enterprise Drive on the Cinto campus, the firm also maintains offices in Marlborough, Connecticut, as well as West Hartford, Connecticut. As one of the nation's leading professional service firms, CLA exists to create opportunities for our clients, our people, and our communities. We constantly build our capabilities across our integrated service lines, which are wealth advisory, outsourcing, audit, tax, and consulting. So when our clients have a need, we're ready to help them out. At CLA, we work together as one family to bring our clients insight, experience, and skill sets to help move them forward. It's truly a seamless experience. We're also very proud of the CLA Foundation. It's a private 501c3 organization that's funded solely by donations from CLA family members. And since its inception in 2015, the foundation has granted more than $5 million to advance career opportunities across the nation. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Patrick Flaherty. And I'm just... Patrick is the Director of Research and Information at the Connecticut Department of Labor, the DOL. The Office of Research gathers and analyzes and disseminates information on the economy, the workforce, and careers that is used to evaluate the economic health of Connecticut, support and promote state workforce development activities, and assist students and job seekers in making career choices. Patrick received his bachelor's degree in social studies from Harvard University and a master's degree in economics from the University of Connecticut. He currently serves as an adjunct professor at the UConn Hartford campus, where he teaches principle of microeconomics. Patrick has also authored several manuscripts and has been a frequent speaker to both business and job seeker groups. And prior to joining the DOL, Patrick enjoyed a career in banking and also served for 10 years as the state representative in the Connecticut General Assembly. Finally, Patrick serves as the DOL Commissioner's designee as a member of the Connecticut Retirement Security Authority. Patrick, the screen is all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, and very happy to be here. You mentioned my career in banking, and when I left banking and my 401k was available, I rolled it into an IRA at People's United. So I know John Traynor is watching my money, and I really appreciate that. And I feel very confident that the experts at People's United are looking out for me based on the presentation I heard just a few moments ago. So I try to think of myself as an optimist. I know economists always have that idea, optimists and pessimists, and I think we can all agree that starting in early 2020, all of us have just been in this bewildered state. I keep hoping I can retire this cartoon, and was about ready to do so, and then Omicron came in, and maybe I'm hoping that this is the last presentation I'll be giving where I use this cartoon, that maybe things really are going to get back to normal. As you can see, that's the name of my talk, Back to Normal. So John did a great job talking about the national situation, so I'm just not going to go through these slides. I'm certainly happy to share my slides with anyone who would like them, but let's just turn directly to what's happening in the Connecticut economy and the Connecticut labor market. So this is the structure of the Connecticut economy before the pandemic. Healthcare, the largest sector by far. That's true in almost every state in the nation. And one of the important things to know about Connecticut is that manufacturing is still the fourth largest sector. We have thousands of more jobs in manufacturing in Connecticut than we have in finance and insurance combined, even though we think of ourselves as a financial center, which we are, but we're really also a real manufacturing center. And that's particularly important in the Greater Valley area, as you'll see in a moment. So the pandemic certainly did wipe out a couple 100,000 jobs in our state. Most of them have come back, but we still haven't quite recovered where we were even at the beginning of 2020. Unfortunately, this is the year before the pandemic, and as you can see, even before the pandemic, we were seeing structural change within the way people shop. Retail was contracting. 4,000 jobs out of a base of over 240,000 isn't I saw a headline, retail apocalypse. Well, not an apocalypse, but definitely on a shrinkage happening and I'm guilty myself. The smiley boxes show up at my house, and certainly since the pandemic, they have been coming more rapidly, and I think not just in my house, but throughout the state and throughout the country. Then the pandemic hit. We had a 2-month real severe shutdown. The restaurants, as you can see, lost almost 80,000 jobs, but every sector saw a decline during that 2-month period. And then, from April 20 to now, almost every sector has gained. A little concern that finance and insurance has actually continued to shrink even after the pandemic ended, or the pandemic didn't end, the shutdown ended. We're still in the pandemic, unfortunately. But as you can see, and so restaurants, for example, this is sort of where we stand from before the pandemic. So the restaurants lost about 80,000 jobs. They've gained back over 60,000, still well below where they were. Healthcare, the ironic, I think, term that in a pandemic we're actually seeing shrinkage in healthcare. A lot of that is the dental offices, the elective surgeries, those kind of things haven't all come back. And of course, there is the labor shortage. So healthcare would have more jobs in it today than it has if they could fill all the openings that they want. The social assistance also includes daycare, and that's also a sector that unfortunately has really not come back yet. And then this is what things have looked like in the state over the past year. So nationally, we are at record job openings. In Connecticut, we're at record job openings. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in the past few months has actually started issuing sort of experimental series on openings and hires by state. And so this is the statistics for Connecticut. If you're an employer out there, you know that you're competing with many, many other companies that are right now trying to hire more job openings than we've ever seen in the past. And as John mentioned, the quits situation. Now, many of us, and I'm one of them, that believe that this idea of the Great Resignation is really false. The vast majority of the people who are quitting their jobs are quitting their job to take another. And John mentioned that about the waiter or waitress who can get $3 an hour more across the street, quitting their job and moving across the street. That's really what is happening. There is also some changing within industries. Some of that is actually good. Some of that the state is promoting. We're trying to help folks in low income and low wage jobs train up to get better positions, and some of that is actually happening. But if you're a hiring manager at a company, you're dancing as fast as you can, and it's still not fast enough, right, because of the churn that's happening. Fortunately, most of the separations that we're seeing are voluntary. Layoffs have come down. There was a little bit of a seasonal spike at the end of 2021, as we usually see, and we see that in the claims data as well. And as you can see, we had the jump in the initial claims, which we almost always see at the end of one calendar year, the beginning of a new calendar year, but that has come right back down, and the continued claims are also back to what I would consider to be a normal pre-pandemic level. So the labor market really is healing, and I think the one big concern we have is exactly the one that John mentioned, which is the labor force participation rate. And we have seen a pretty significant decline in the labor force participation rate among most sectors of the population. Interestingly, and something we really want to be tout, is that both the Black and Hispanic labor force participation rates in Connecticut are significantly higher than the national average. So, when we think about the changing workforce, and our workforce is changing, the folks that, are part of the diversity of our wonderful state really want to work and are working and are participating in the labor force at a higher rate than their counterparts in other parts of our nation. So that's something we can be proud of. One of the things there's a concern, and I do think that the daycare issue is part of this. The labor force participation rate, particularly among young women, really fell during the pandemic and has not come back. And among the youngest women, our labor force participation rate in Connecticut is actually significantly lower than in the nation. And so that's something that we really need to think about and hopefully address. And certainly the Labor Department is working with our partners at the Office of Early Childhood and the Governor's Workforce Council to try to address that issue to help these folks get back into the labor force. So, I spelled greater wrong, so I will fix this slide before I send it out. That's a little embarrassing. Greater Valley with an E, 2 E's in greater. But the towns, for the rest of the presentation, I'm just going to look at 3 sets of towns. These are what I call the Greater Valley towns, which are the ones listed on the website. The neighbor towns, also that's spelled wrong. I can't believe I was up pretty late last night doing these slides. I apologize. But these are the towns and the surrounding towns, and then the nearby cities, Bridgeport, New Haven, and Waterbury. So in the Greater Valley towns, manufacturing, the largest sector. And as I said, healthcare is almost always the largest sector, but in the Greater Valley town, manufacturing, the largest sector before the pandemic. Also in the neighbor towns, and then in the cities, healthcare and education, by far the largest sectors, and this is the combination of Waterbury, New Haven, and Bridgeport. This is how employment looks like, and right within the Greater Valley, nice bounce back from the pandemic after years of upward trend. So right within the Greater Valley, very strong job growth above, outpacing the rest of the state by far. Unfortunately, the neighbor towns were actually on somewhat of a downward trend even before the pandemic hit. Obviously, you can see big drop during the pandemic. And then this data goes through the third quarter of 2021, so it's not exactly current. Hopefully we've seen some growth at the end of 2021, but still well below where we were when the pandemic hit. And then the nearby cities, so, John talked about, Bill talked about the fact that we want to talk about revitalizing our cities. The big drop in our cities was in the 1990s, really held steady. And as you can see, starting in 2010, coming out of the Great Recession, upward trends in our cities. And then, of course, the pandemic has been particularly devastating in our urban areas. And talk about bewildered. I really feel for the folks that are really trying to work on economic development in the cities, because the pandemic has been a particularly urban issue, starting with New York City and moving on down. Even here in Connecticut, we see the effects in our cities. So looking at this is not seasonally adjusted data, so it's fair to go third quarter to third quarter. So sort of the last third quarter before the pandemic versus the latest data we have. As you can see, the structure of our how the economy has changed in the Greater Valley towns. Healthcare has, healthcare has actually expanded. Manufacturing, now this is just less than 400 jobs, so not to have a panic attack, but there's probably some opportunities to try to get some of these jobs back. Perhaps they're unfilled positions that employers are trying to hire. This is what's happened in the neighbor towns since the third quarter before the pandemic. And then in the nearby cities, so social assistance, education, professional scientific services are actually more people working. And we certainly know about a lot of the initiatives in the New Haven area, in particular with regard to the professional scientific and technical services. This is actually very positive news. And then other services, notice that's like getting your hair done, getting your nails done, auto repair. There's a whole lot of things. And notice that this is way down in the cities. I think folks are just still not comfortable going back into the cities to get some of that personal care that they used to get. And so this is, you can really see, yes, there was a pandemic. It's still not over, and we see it in the data. I am going to skip over some of this. I know I have lots of slides, and I'm certainly happy to share them again with everybody. We subscribe to a service called Help Wanted Online through the Conference Board. They actually scrape the data from a company called Burning Glass. And so we're able to look at current job postings in Connecticut. And I'll sort of end by sharing these with you. Well, actually, I have one more thing after this. So the job postings data, same as the openings, record highs. This is actually really current, right through January of 2022. This is the number of new postings. So 40,000 new postings showed up in January of 2022. This is the industries that are showing, well, this is actually all the industries. I sorted them by the industries with the most postings in the Greater Valley town. So a lot of openings in healthcare, retail, manufacturing. As I mentioned, probably manufacturing would be stronger if these companies could fill all the positions that they are trying to fill. And then these are the occupations with the most postings right now in the Greater Valley towns. Nurses and laborers, almost always 1 and 2 everywhere we look. This is the same story in the surrounding towns and in the nearby cities. And then these are the employers that right now are looking for workers. So it's this is usually a kind of slide that's of great interest to job seekers, but perhaps you have some folks in your life who are looking for a job. As you can see, these companies are all trying to hire right now today. These are current job postings in our area. So there was so Gad Lebanon is an economist. He's actually moving over to Burning Glass. He wrote this op-ed in January for Forbes magazine. Interestingly, Forbes is getting a big investment from one of the cryptocurrency companies. So sort of new school is investing in old school publications. And then Gad had this article about dozens of reasons to be cheerful. I just love the headline so much. I just want to I started my talk on being bewildered. I want to end on a cheerful note, although some of his reasons to be cheerful cut both ways. For example, rapid wage growth. If you're a worker, that's actually very, very good news. If you're trying to hire, well, that may be, on the opposite side. Again, tight labor market, fantastic for workers trying to find a job. Not such a great news if you're a company trying to hire. John Traynor mentioned that the non-college wages are growing faster. This is something that was mentioned in this article as well. So if you have a moment and you want to take a look at that, you certainly can Google this op-ed in Forbes magazine. So I went through it very fast. We provide lots of great information. We have a distribution list that is managed by a human being. He works for me. His name is Todd. It's not a listserv. He will not spam you. He will not give your email to anybody else. If you are interested in receiving one email a month from us with all of our publications, and we would be happy to email that to you, let me know or let Todd know, and we'll just add you to the list. And if you get tired of getting the emails, you can just let us know, and we will, with tears in our eyes, but without any argument, remove you from the distribution list. If you'd like a copy of these slides, or if you're interested in getting on our email list, the best thing to do is just send me an email, patrick.flaherty@ct.gov, and I'm always happy to I answer that phone directly when I'm in the office. I'm now in the office 4 days a week. I work from home 1 day a week. So you can call me. I will answer that number if you have any questions about any of the things that we've discussed, or if there's anything that the labor market department or the research department, the Office of Research can help you with. And I will stop there, and I share these slides with anyone who would like them. That was a whirlwind talk, I know. But
yes, it was. Thank you so much, Patrick, for your update. And I do urge our members on the call and all of our members to subscribe. I do get your monthly email, and I always find very valuable information there. So thank you, Patrick. I also want to thank you. Patrick and I had a chat. I said, well, Patrick, will you be wearing your signature bow tie? He said, yes. I said, well, I will wear my signature tie and matching pocket square. But I do want to say, Patrick, I think we're becoming fashion dinosaurs in a land of sweatpants and pajamas these days. So thank you so much. Patrick and Jai, I want you to stay on, but Christy Pentima, Nancy, could you bring Chris up? Before we go to some questions, and I see a number of them in the chat box, we're going to try to bring Christy Pentima up onto the stage. And I'm going to put a few people on notice after Chris's remarks to get the questions going. I see Bing Carbone, President is with us. Bing, we're going to bring you to the stage to ask a question. Steve Schwartz, if you're willing to come up. Mark Yash, perhaps, if you'd be willing to come up, and if not, we will pose those questions for you. But let me, I see Chris is on the screen. Good morning, Chris. Thank you so much. Chris is the president of the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, CBIA, and is just a strong partner with this chamber and chambers across the state. And we really value the partnership that we have with you and your fine team of lawyers and registered lobbyists representing the business community. Chris, I wonder if you could share some reflections about the governor's budget address of this past Wednesday, a little bit about the start of the legislative session and the general mood. Patrick and John both talked about the mood of CEOs of large companies, but not so great, among small businesses. So, Chris, thank you for joining us this morning.
Hey, Bill, it's great to be with you and Patrick and John. And I see a lot of familiar initials, and I had to scroll over them, Bill, and see the familiar names over in the box there in the square. So it's great to be with your folks and the Valley Chamber. Session started on Wednesday, kicked off with the opening bell and the governor's remarks. And I think the mood here in Connecticut is a lot like you just heard from John and Patrick. It's a mixed bag. We're surrounded by all this money that came in from the feds, the volatility cap of the capital gains, and we've got a budget surplus right now in Connecticut of about $2.2 billion for this fiscal year that ends June 30th, and another nearly $2 billion surplus for next fiscal year. So a lot of opportunity, and really a once in a lifetime, once in a generational opportunity as to how we invest those funds. And the governor came out with his proposal on Wednesday, which was some individual tax relief, which we've been advocating for certainly here in Connecticut, because we need to make the state desirable so we retain our current population, but also attract new population. You saw a lot in John and Patrick's charts about the kind of shrinking workforce, and that's because we haven't had great population growth over the past decade. And we saw some growth during COVID, ironically, because of the way we responded to the pandemic and because of what Connecticut offers. There's great quality of life, great education system, great people like you all in the Valley and throughout Connecticut. And so we have this opportunity, and now it's how do we invest these dollars? Think of yourself as a CEO running a business with a balance sheet that has a lot of cash on it, so you can invest in a lot of different things, but also a balance sheet that has a significant amount of debt on it with some serious long-term liabilities. So do you use that cash to pay down your long-term liabilities, which is one of the things the governor is proposing? Do you use that cash to really reward and incentivize your employees, which is kind of that individual tax relief that the governor has proposed? What we would like to see more of, Bill, is certainly some business tax relief, especially, as you mentioned, for our small businesses who have really struggled during the pandemic. And so CBI has come up with some policy priorities. I know you're really supportive of these, Bill, and the rest of the chambers throughout the state, for some small business tax relief to really spur economic growth, spur that population growth, spur that business growth over the next several months, so that when we get into the out years, maybe we erase some of the deficits and continue to pay down our long-term liabilities. No doubt about that. We need fiscal stability, certainty in Connecticut, and business owners really want to see that. So we look forward to working with everyone this session. Keep in mind, there's about 187 other CEOs out there. They're called the legislators, who want to figure out how to spend this money. So it's important that your voices are heard. They want to hear from the business owners. They want to hear from leaders. Business Day will be in April. Bill, you're a great partner at that. Between now and then, if we could help get your voices heard, certainly reach out to Bill or the CBIA, and that will be very, very helpful in getting some of these priorities through.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. And I do recognize we do have Representative Cara Rochelle is with us. Cara is Vice Chair of the Commerce Committee. So thank you, Cara, if you're still with us. I'm going to see, Nancy, if we can bring, and Chris, do stay with us, if we can bring Bing Carbone up. But while we do that, Mark Yash has a couple of questions. I'm going to read these, Mark. I know you're out there. Mark is with Hodson Realty, a great friend here at the Chamber. Two-part question. Do employers really value older employees in order to keep them? My direct experience with two large employers has been that they laid off most of the expensive employees to potentially affect, their bottom line. And then a follow-up question. My experience has been that employers are looking for a non-existent employee with of qualities that just do not exist, right? So there's skills gap, right? So John, Patrick, Chris, any one of you. Patrick, why don't we start with you with response to that?
Well, definitely the labor force is aging, and we did do a survey of claimants and long-term unemployed, and age discrimination was mentioned many times by the respondents as a reason that they have been not able to get back in the labor force. I hope that what they are experiencing isn't that, but that's at least how they perceive it. Mm-hmm. And I think that everyone needs to, there's going to be a big adjustment. So employers are going to need to think about what their next employee is going to look like. Won't necessarily be exactly what they imagined. I mean, John mentioned the birth rate. I mean, the problem with the reason there are not enough 20-year-olds out there isn't because they have left Connecticut. That is a myth. It is because they were not born 20 years ago. So if the birth rate falls 20 years ago, 20 years later, those folks are not entering the labor force. And that really is what's happened here in Connecticut and really throughout much of the country. There are a few states where there's an exception, like Utah, but mostly not. And then the employees themselves need to have a little bit more imagination. I mean, the number one reason that the claimant said that they hadn't found a job is they couldn't find a job that matched their skills. Well, I think sometimes folks have a very narrow definition of what they can do. I think of myself as an economist, and if I lose my job and I can't find a job as an economist, I can't find a job that matches my skills. Well, maybe I could do something else, like as an, take some class and do some accounting or something. And then also just the environment. I am now, I don't mind saying this, I'm 60 years old. I'm now on my third commissioner who is younger than I am. And they're getting younger all the time. And I plan to be at the Labor Department for quite some time. And I expect there'll be another commissioner who will be even younger than the one who is the commissioner now. And, she's doing a great job, and she is clearly my boss. Even though she is significantly younger than I am. I really don't know how old she is, but I know she's younger than I am, and by quite a bit. And that's okay. But that sometimes a older worker has a hard time thinking about that, having a boss who's a different background, different age, different gender. It doesn't bother me at all, but I know that there are some folks that becomes a barrier. So I do think the idea, the U.S. Department, I'm sorry to babble on here, but U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says that 10 years from now, there'll be 2 million more workers in the labor force 75 years of age and older than there are today. And we are going to need the work of those workers. And they're going to need to work because they probably lost money in the Great Recession, and they unfortunately probably lost money in the pandemic as well. All right, I will stop.
No, that's well said. And just anecdotally, our finance director here, rest his soul, Al Patuzzi, worked until he was 85. A few days a week, and we lost him just last December. But his famous line was, "Bill, I hate to be late leaving early." I love that. We'd check out at 5 minutes to 12. John, any thoughts about the age issue and how employers have an opportunity now to broaden their their search area?
Yeah, I think Patrick hit the nail on the head. As employers, we need to think differently. With our older workers. Training the younger ones. One group that we haven't mentioned yet that is, it's something that I'm wrestling with, and Patrick mentioned it. One of the lessons that we learned in the pandemic is that when the school closes or there's a turmoil in the outside world, basically the burden falls on mom. And some of the best, most senior portfolio managers that I have are women with younger kids. So I have looked at this and I've said, what? Again, we're not going back to 5 days a week when everybody's in the office. I need to think about, all right, I've got to permanently set up a structure where I need to, if I want to hold on to them, I need to think differently about how I manage them. And I know a lot of people are saying, okay, great, I'll just make sure I've got high-speed internet, or we'll put good connections so that they can work at home. If I want to hold on to those people, I've also, again, as a manager, I've got to think about making sure that their career stays on track. Just putting a high-speed data line into their house, they're probably going to be worried, gee, if everybody else is in the office and I'm not there, is my career going to fall off? So, the pressure is on us as employers, the pressure is on us as managers to think differently about the workforce that we're going to have in the future. And I think that's going to be with us long past the pandemic.
Thank you. And we're going to turn to a manufacturing employer. And thank you, Patrick, for your insights about breaking down the employment in the Valley, the concentration of manufacturing. Certainly Chris, who comes out of manufacturing, resonates. Bing, do you want to share a comment, a question?
Yeah, sure. First, Bill Purcell, thank you so much, and the Greater Valley Chamber of Commerce for putting on this event. It is so helpful to me, and I know many other business owners that are on the call here. And Chris, my friend, thank you. And Patrick, I'm smirking and cracking up here because I am also 60 years old, and I report to a 36-year-old CEO of my parent company. So interesting to hear that as well, and as a lot of us are. So, John Traynor, I always enjoy what you have to say, and I am furiously taking notes. So
My question, maybe a comment, is directed at you. Modern Plastics is a 77-year-old business, plastics company here in Shelton, Connecticut. I want to go back to your slide when you talked about people quitting, and Patrick, you talked about that as well. It's a huge problem. I stay well engaged with social media, including TikTok, and I see what people are doing as they quit their jobs, as well as through direct experience that I've had with acquaintances, etc. So, for example, one of our former employees resigned because he is now making an obscene amount of money doing online affiliate marketing and selling online products from China, no less. I have another friend who quit his job and he bought 6 soda and vending machines, and he's generating $600 a day in quarters while he's in Aruba right now. So back to the comment of employee retention. It's an absolute issue. We keep elevating starting salaries. We keep handing out cost of living raises, salary adjustments, bonuses, profit share, and so forth. So this is, to me, seems like a vicious cycle, because as companies continue to have higher payroll expenses, we are forced to raise our prices to recoup these costs. And when we raise our raw material prices to our customers, they have to raise it to the consumer, et cetera. So I don't know how we get out of this, or maybe we don't. I don't know where the end is on all of this, but I can tell you, we just hired an inside sales representative at an astonishing salary. And I don't see an end to it. So I don't know if you can comment any more on that.
You know, there are probably 5 different conversations that we could have with that question, and you hit the nail on the head. But, you know, and I know Patrick has got great data on all of those points. But if you think about, you know, let's just go back to inflation. You know, prices are moving up, and I ran through the slides, but remember I differentiated between the goods inflation and the services inflation. Well, you know, we believe that goods inflation will come down, but that doesn't mean inflation's going away, because what we believe we're going to see more so on the service side. Remember that bar chart that I showed where wages were increasing dramatically for the waiters and waitresses and the hotel workers? That's going to continue. So I think one of the problems that the Fed is going to run up against is they're going to see, okay, you know, computer chips they're coming back into the country. So, you know, we're seeing goods inflation go down. Inflation is going to be a problem that's going to stick with us. And it's primarily going to be wage inflation. At least that's what we believe, because labor markets are tight. The issues that you just raised are going to continue. So unfortunately, we think that's going to put the pressure on the Fed to probably increase more than what Jerome Powell thought he was going to do just 3 months ago. You know, not dramatically, but we think rates are going to go up. The key issue, though, that you raised, as a business person, you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I keep, my labor costs intact? Traditionally, what you've done is you've invested in capital. That last chart that I put up there really was a little bit of a jab in the side to everybody on this call. Basically, as you invest in capital, you're probably going to be sharing more of the return of that investment. Traditionally, if you take a look at the chart, a lot of that return has accrued to the suppliers of capital. What we believe is that as you invest, your return on investment is probably going to be lower, because you're going to be sharing more of the return with the workers. But, really the only way I think you're going to be able to see, labor costs come back into control is if we see more of an increase in capital spending. We're seeing that. You go into restaurants now, everybody's got the QR code. My wife and I were out this weekend. The woman had a little handheld computer, the waitress. She took our order. She didn't have to go back into the kitchen. It was zapped right into the kitchen. So, on the service side, we're starting to see some of those investments, but unfortunately, you're going to have to invest more in your business, and you're going to get a lower return than what you would have gotten in the past. I wish I had better news. I know, Patrick, you probably got better data on all of that than I do. I mean, what would you add to that?
Well, the only thing I would say about, inflation is that, as we learned in grad school, when you have big stimulus, you're going to get inflation with the lag, and it's right on schedule. But I would observe that we haven't had any stimulus checks go out in quite some months. All of the extra unemployment benefit programs are over. We're going to be living with the inflation of that for a few months. But in fact, if the idea is that there needs to be fiscal tightening, it's actually happened by the end of those programs. So I'm a little bit more optimistic about inflation than some of the doomsayers, only because I think that the current inflation, which is real, is partly a result of the real fiscal stimulus that occurred last year and the year before. And the end of that stimulus is enough to actually start bringing inflation back down again, at least based on what I learned in grad school. So,
Thank you, Ben. Chris, I just want to address a question to you while we have you too. Connecticut has been a great beneficiary of this infrastructure bill, finally allowing us to deal with some of our log jams in the state. So what do you see in terms of the infusion of capital as a stimulus for our economy to improve the ease of business? What's the number look like? Is it the $6 billion? Is that what we're talking about over the next several years? Can you address that?
On the infrastructure specifically, Bill, it's $5.4 billion over the next 5 years. So it's a huge opportunity. Connecticut had some structural issues heading into the pandemic that were really exposed, and one that you all know about was certainly our transportation infrastructure system, including broadband access to Wi-Fi. So this is really going to help us, in addition to the special transportation fund actually starting to grow because gas prices have gone up as well. So this was one of those cracks in the armor that's existed in Connecticut for a long time, and we're getting some help from the feds here to address it. And it's much needed, and it's going to be great. The big concern, if there is one, not to be pessimistic, optimistic certainly, but we've got a huge number of state employees eligible to retire this year and next year, and some of those folks in the Department of Transportation, they're kind of the first line, the front workers, if you will, the first process to get this money out there. So if those folks can't design and engineer with enough bandwidth, it won't go out to the private sector for us to then deploy the money on roads, rails, bridges, and everything else. So we're advocating in our priorities that we really leverage public-private partnership, leverage those engineering companies around Connecticut to do some of the design, so we don't have that bottleneck at the very beginning, which would then create a bottleneck throughout, and making sure we get that money dispersed out there to drive economic growth. It's going to create significant jobs, and it's going to make our state a whole heck of a lot better, especially for the labor force, because one of the big issues around labor, in addition to being old and childcare, is moving folks around our state. We have a lot of manufacturers that are maybe in the rural area, and we have a lot of great opportunities to tap into our urban areas where the workers potentially are, but moving them, our public transportation, this will be a huge opportunity.
That's great. That's well said. Folks, we're getting to the 9:15 hour, and I want to first thank our distinguished speakers. Thank you so much, John, for coming back year after year. You never disappoint. You always lift us up, and we appreciate it. Patrick, it's so nice to see you, and thank you to the Commissioner, Dante. I've had the pleasure of meeting her. She was here in Derby before the holidays to open up a manufacturing center at the Derby High School. A wonderful, wonderful leader. I wish her well with her confirmation. And Chris, thank you so much. We will be up. We will promote certainly Connecticut Business Day, but in between, we hope to bring our legislators together at Bronson Country Club. I believe it's March 11th. So watch for that. We've invited them, and look forward to coming together face to face. Thank you for your generous offer to share your slides. We have recorded this, and it will go into the Chamber's library and will be distributed. I want to give you an example. Last year, the CEO of a major company, after your presentation, said, Bill, can you send me the recording and the slides, because I want to share them with my management team. And that's what we will encourage our members. So this has life beyond today's session. Of course, we'll send it down to the Library of Congress as well for posterity. But let me leave you with this, sort of in the spirit of the Olympics. I hope you're all enjoying them as much as I'm going to show my age too. I was at the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. Of course, I was only a first grader, but you remember the film Miracle on Ice, the year that the U.S. Olympic hockey team took gold. It was never been at a more exciting athletic event. So I'm feeling that spirit. I hope you are as well, the spirit of unity and competitiveness and sportsmanship. At the same time, of course, we're all nervous as hell about what's happening on the international scene with the escalation in Ukraine. And we just pray for a diplomatic resolution to this crisis, because all bets are off, in terms of the impact on our economy. And then finally, I want to wish you all a happy Super Sunday. Though your teams may not be there, you have to admit it's been one hell of a season. And this matchup promises to be hopefully as exciting as all those leading up to it. So I'm going to invite our distinguished speakers. I want to thank you, John Zinno. Thank you, Justin Vescovi, for your continued support and leadership. We have the ability to go into the individual tables. If you're willing to move from this screen back to and say hello to some of our guests. So round of applause, virtual round of applause for all of our speakers. Thank you so much.